PIA Flight 268, heading to Nepal in the Himalayan mountain range, was not just another flight for the crew. The airport's location and their limited experience with the approach to this runway made it unique. The aircraft was approaching an airport whose location, surrounded by mountains, concealed more than it revealed. September 28, 1992, Jinnah International Airport, Karachi, Pakistan. It's 11 in the morning, and here, PIA Flight 268 is preparing to depart for Tribhuvan Airport in Kathmandu, a destination more than 3.5 hours away. Pakistan International Airlines is Pakistan's national carrier, and since its founding in 1955 has been a symbol of aviation in the country. Born from the merger of Orient Airways and a state-proposed airline by the government, PIA began operating under its current name in 1955. From its early days, the airline took on the mission of connecting Pakistan to the rest of the world, with its first international flight operating between Karachi and London via Cairo and Rome. In its early years, PIA stood out as the first Asian airline to operate a Boeing 707 service in 1960, marking its entry into the jet age. During the 1970s and 1980s, the airline expanded its international flight network and began operating transatlantic flights. It also introduced iconic aircraft like the Boeing 747, which became a hallmark of PIA's fleet. In the 21st century, PIA has continued modernizing its fleet, acquiring advanced aircraft such as the Boeing 777. This modern fleet has allowed the airline to maintain key international routes to destinations like the United Kingdom, the United States, and Saudi Arabia, while also retaining a strong presence on domestic routes within Pakistan. The aircraft for this flight is a 16.5-year-old Airbus A300 with approximately 20,000 flight cycles. The A300 was the first wide-body, twin-engine commercial aircraft produced by Airbus. Its first flight took place in 1972, marking a milestone in the aviation industry and the beginning of Airbus's successful journey in manufacturing commercial aircraft. With a capacity to carry between 250 and 300 passengers, the A300 revolutionized the market with its efficiency and profitability. Its reliability, combined with the adoption of composite materials and an advanced control system, made it a natural successor to older wide-body aircraft like the DC-10 and the Lockheed TriStar. However, production of the A300 ceased in 2007, with a total of 843 units built. At the controls of the A300 is Captain Iftikhar Janjua, a seasoned 49-year-old pilot with 13,192 flight hours, 6,260 of which are on the Airbus A300. Beside him is First Officer Hassan Akhtar, 38 years old, with 5,849 flight hours, 1,469 of them on the same aircraft model. Also on board are two flight engineers, Pervez Malik and Muhammad Ashraf, with over 13,500 combined flight hours. Completing the crew are 8 flight attendants, and with 155 passengers, there are 167 people in total aboard Flight 268. Despite the crew's experience, the situation in the cockpit that afternoon would prove to be challenging. The flight to Kathmandu was not routine for these pilots. Furthermore, the shadow of an accident 59 days earlier loomed over them. A Thai Airways International Airbus A310 crashed during its approach to the same airport. Flight 311, leaving no survivors. At 11:13 a.m., Flight 268 began taxiing down the runway. The aircraft took off without issue and set course for Kathmandu. As the flight approached Kathmandu, conditions began to deteriorate. The crew was warned about the presence of large and dense clouds in the area, a common occurrence, but one that would make the descent even more difficult. The approach to Kathmandu is notoriously challenging due to the airport's location in an oval-shaped valley surrounded by high mountains, making it essential to follow every step of the descent procedure precisely. Nearly 3 hours after takeoff, at 2 p.m., the PIA A300 began preparing for the approach. The crew contacted Tribhuvan Airport's control tower and received instructions to descend via the Sierra approach, a route passing over the Mahabharat mountain range south of Kathmandu. The flight was required to descend in 7 steps, reaching 5,800 feet at a waypoint known as Sierra. Flight 268 was cleared to land on Kathmandu's runway 02, and the crew began the descent as planned. Clouds obscured their view of the terrain, making the aircraft's instrument readings crucial for such an approach. PIA 268, please report when you are 16 miles from the airport. The descent checkpoints included altitudes of 11,500 feet at 16 miles from the airport, 10,500 feet at 13 miles, 9,500 feet at 10 miles, and finally 8,200 feet at 8 miles. Once past this point, they would receive clearance to descend to 5,800 feet and align with the runway without issue. The runway itself is located 4,313 feet above sea level. Shortly afterward, Flight 268 reached the first checkpoint, 16 miles from the airport.
PIA 268, we are at the 16 DME point, descending to the next.
At this checkpoint, where they should have been at 11,500 feet, they were flying at 11,000 feet, but the first officer did not notify the controller. The descent rate remained rapid, and as they approached the airport, the altitude discrepancy between their actual and required height gradually increased. At the next checkpoint, 13 miles from the airport, they were flying at 9,500 feet. The descent continued. The aircraft approached the clouds, and at 10 miles its altitude was 8,200 feet. The required altitude for the final checkpoint at 8 DME. The crew tried to stay calm, but the thick fog was closing in, making them feel as though they were losing control of the flight. Captain Janjua and First Officer Akhtar exchanged worried glances, aware that conditions were no longer as favorable as they had been at the start of the descent. A sense of uncertainty overtook them as the aircraft continued its descent. The pilots hoped that their passage through the dense clouds would be brief, allowing them to quickly spot the airport. However, in a matter of seconds, what they saw ahead was the side of a mountain. At 2:30 p.m., the plane collided with Bhattedanda mountain, just over 9.16 nautical miles, approximately 14.7 kilometers from the airport. The impact was devastating, completely destroying the aircraft and instantly killing all 167 people on board. There was no chance for rescue, as the impact was immediate and catastrophic. Witnesses at the scene confirmed that visibility on the mountain was barely 20 meters due to the dense fog in the area, further complicating any rescue efforts. The victims' bodies were recovered by local rescue teams, supported by the Nepalese army, who worked tirelessly to retrieve parts of the aircraft. What went wrong? Why did they descend below the minimum safe altitude? The accident investigation was led by Andrew Robinson of the UK's Air Accident Investigation Branch, in collaboration with Nepalese authorities and experts from Canada's Transportation Safety Board. The investigation team, aided by the Nepalese army, quickly reached the crash site to collect evidence and recover the aircraft's remains. A critical breakthrough came with the recovery of the black boxes, which were sent to Paris for analysis. However, the investigation faced several challenges due to technological limitations and the rugged terrain of the area. The first phase of the investigation focused on reconstructing the flight sequence and identifying errors during the approach. Analysis of the black box recordings revealed clear communication between the captain and Kathmandu's control tower. However, the cockpit voice recorder did not capture conversations between the captain and the first officer, leaving a significant gap in understanding the errors made. The evidence indicated that the primary cause of the accident was the failure of one or both pilots to follow the prescribed approach procedures. Instead, they inadvertently adopted a descent profile that consistently placed the aircraft below the correct altitude at each waypoint. Why and how this happened remains unclear, as no records of the cockpit conversations were available. Another contributing factor was the lack of radar at Kathmandu airport. This made it impossible for air traffic controllers to accurately track the aircraft's position during its approach. Controllers relied solely on periodic altitude reports from the pilots, which left room for critical errors. Additionally, Kathmandu's air traffic controllers lacked the ability to recognize that the flight was descending too quickly and at an altitude that was dangerously low. It was also discovered that some local controllers had low confidence in their skills and were hesitant to interrupt or question pilot decisions. Regarding onboard systems, the GPWS, which could have alerted the crew about the proximity to terrain, did not function as expected. Although operational, the GPWS failed to issue an alert at the critical moment. This was attributed to several factors: the steep terrain of the mountainous region, which could interfere with the system's effectiveness, and the aging equipment on board the aircraft. Investigators also examined the possibility of engine failure. However, the engines were found to be operational during the examination, ruling out a mechanical failure as a cause. The final report concluded that the accident was primarily the result of a combination of human errors. The pilots descended too early during the approach and did not follow proper descent procedures. This miscalculation, combined with a lack of oversight by air traffic controllers and the absence of radar at the airport, led to the tragic impact. The investigation emphasized that a review of the approach altitudes and enhanced training and coordination among the crew could have prevented the disaster. The final report recommended several changes to aviation practices to prevent similar tragedies. Among the most significant recommendations were the installation of radar at Kathmandu airport to improve aircraft monitoring during approaches, improved training for air traffic controllers in terrain clearance, and handling complex situations like this flight was also suggested. Additionally, the report highlighted the importance of enhancing pilot training and flight manuals for the proper use of systems like the GPWS. In memory of the 167 victims of flight PK-268, PIA contributed to the creation of the Lele Pia Memorial Park near the crash site in Lele, approximately 10 kilometers from the point of impact. In 2012, PIA ceased funding the park's maintenance, transferring responsibility first to the victims' families and later to the local district council. The park remains a place of remembrance for all those affected. This accident was the deadliest of 1992.